die skadu sprei, soos ons groei in kundigheid, mag U ons lei. Sien ons hoe hier lei met die hand, laat U seënlus oor ons land. Three strong streams united flow, Africa stands proud and tall. As we learn, we trust, we know God is in control. Bless us, O Lord, guide us with grace. May Northwest be blessed always. Bless us, O Lord, sien ons hier. O rethink ons en morena, sien ons, bless us, O Lord.
Prayer for the inaugural address at Northwest University by Professor Ireen Choga on the 24th of August, 2023. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in our hearts the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and you shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. Let us pray. God, our loving Father, in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, you said, where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you are there. May you be present with us from the beginning up to the end of this program. We give glory to you for the gift of this wonderful day, that you have enabled the dream of your people to become a reality through this inaugural address to your sons and daughters to explain exports and export diversification, key drivers and trends in sub-Saharan Africa. By your inspired Professor Ireen Choga, in order to cultivate in your offspring this wonderful economic knowledge, to make them become better personally, and in future use it to transform the lives of others to address their needs. We thank you also, dear Lord, for giving this wonderful opportunity for Northwest University through this address to fulfill its profound goals of researching, teaching, and producing new knowledge for the different needs of the world. May this program help the government of this wonderful country to always play its parental role of ensuring quality education for all its citizens without tiring in realizing this dream. For according to Malcolm, education is the passport to the future. Our tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. May your Holy Spirit, Lord, the third person of the Trinity, inspire this university management, its staff and support staff, its students and its different stakeholders to always plan for a moment like this, to inspire, motivate, and challenge its students and the entire world to become creative and generous like Professor Ireen Choga to share their God-given ability with the world. Through this wonderful address today, may our three human domains of psychomotor, affective, and cognitive be equipped with the knowledge to work, to love, and be intelligent enough to find the relevant and up-to-date solutions to our present day's world problems of lack of firm faith in God, poverty, gender inequality, lack of adequate clean water, discrimination, hunger, poor health care, injustice, moral decadence and addictions, social inequality, climate change problem, economic exploitation, and mismanagement of our world resources by the few mighty ones, political disunity in Africa, shortage of able and quality leaders to influence the world positively in order to achieve its humanitarian goals. We pray all this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Good evening, Dumelang, Huenand, Dimadekwana, Sanbonani, Saubona, Manghero, in respect to Prof. Ireen Choga. I'm thrilled to warmly welcome everyone to this prestigious event, the inaugural lecture by Prof. Ireen Choga. Without being discriminative or skipping anyone, let me welcome our professors, the Prof. Herman van der Merwe, who is representing the DVC on this campus, all the deaneries, Prof. Washington Dudu, the directors, the deputy directors, all the colleagues from the Northwest University, other faculties, and from other universities as well. I warmly welcome you to this prestigious event. I want to make a special welcome to these people, otherwise Prof. Ireen would kill me if I don't. Prof. Ireen's mother, can you show by hand if you are here? Mom? Okay. That's Mom Ruramisai Choga Muzituand. And her niece, can you show by hand? Is Prof. Okay. That is Tendai Mavengere. A special welcome to you. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence at this event. Today marks a moment of great pride and jubilation for the Northwest University, the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, and each of us gathered here. Inaugural address plays a crucial role in the university's public events lined up, promoting a broader comprehension of the most recent strides in research within both the faculty and the entire university. An inaugural lecture is a formal address given by a newly appointed full professor at the start of their tenure. It introduces them to the academic community and the public, showcasing their research and future plans. It is a platform to share expertise, research achievements, and academic goals. These lectures foster discussion and celebrate the new role within academic sphere. The new professor has the opportunity to also personally discuss the position and contributions to a chosen field. This year, the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences has the privilege to host 5 inaugural addresses across different disciplines. You can clap a hand for us. Through this inaugural address, the university acknowledges and presents your academic achievement, Prof. Ireen Choga. We are eagerly waiting, anticipating her inaugural speech titled Unveiling Exports and Diversification, particularly looking at the fundamental catalysts and trends in sub-Saharan Africa. With that being said, I now extend an invitation to Prof. Den Misileng, who is the director of the School of Economic Sciences, to introduce our esteemed guest, Prof. Ireen Choga. Thank you, Prof. Den.
Good evening, colleagues. Can I take it up a bit? Okay. I hope you can hear me from here. Prof. Herman van der on behalf of the DVC, Prof. Dudu, Prof. Moroke, and all protocol observed. I think Prof. Moroke did a very good job by observing the entire room of protocol. Mine is just then to go into the real business of the day. I wanted to, before I start, Prof. Choga, to start off with a quotation from one Martin Luther King Jr. He says, and I quote, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience. The ultimate measure of a man is in times of inconvenience, challenge, and controversy." Close quote. They call you Mamox back home. They call you Mamox. Mama can actually relate to Mamox more than Irene and other names. Irene was born on the 21st July, 1982. Can I reiterate that? Can I repeat that? Irene was born on the 21 January 1982. She did her primary and secondary education in Zimbabwe. In 2003, she was given a Zimbabwean government scholarship to study towards a Bachelor of Commerce degree in Business Management and Economics at the University of Fort Hare. During her tenure as an undergraduate student, she received awards as the best student in accounting and other economic subjects. She completed her bachelor's degree in 2005. Thereafter, she was awarded the Dean's Merit Bursary and the Govan Begi Scholarship to do an honors in economics in the same institution. That is in 2006. After completing her honors degree, she then went on to do her master's degree using the same scholarship. She was appointed as a full-time tutor at the University of Fort Hare in 2006. In 2009, she was appointed as a full-time lecturer in the Department of Economics at the very University of Fort Hare, and as a deputy head of department in 2010. While working as a lecturer at the University of Fort Hare, in 2011, she was enrolled with the same university to do her doctoral studies. That's where the journey to full professor began. Thereafter, in 2013, she was appointed as a lecturer at the Noordwes-universiteit And in October thereof 2014, she graduated with a PhD from the same university where she started off, that is University of Fort Hare. She was also named the most productive emerging researcher in the Faculty of Commerce and Administration and the Rector's Emerging Young Researcher Award at the Noordwes-universiteit Mafikeng campus. She was promoted to senior lecturer in 2015 and subsequently in the following year, an associate professor. In addition, she was appointed as the program leader for teaching and learning in the economics department in 2015, program leader of research in 2018, and ethics deputy chairperson in 2019. Currently, Ireen is an external examiner of theses and dissertations for several universities. Ireen is a member of Economic Society of South Africa and the Eurasian Business and Economic Society. She has successfully supervised 10 doctoral students to completion. I need to highlight that. She has successfully supervised 19 master students and more than 75 honor students. In addition, she has mentored 2 postdoctoral fellows. Ireen has published 49 articles in refereed journals and has presented 14 papers at national and international conferences. In addition, she has co-authored 1 book chapter. Ireen is an internationally recognized academic. She collaborates with academics outside the country and is a peer reviewer for several journals. She has received 2 research grants. Should I repeat that? Didn't hear that, good people. She has received 2 research grants. Her research interests are international trade, labor economics, public finance, and econometrics, including, that is, time series and panel data econometrics. In terms of recognition of standing in the discipline of economics, Ireen has a Google citation of 360 reads and an H index of 9. Overall, a well-rounded young academic who has 16 years of experience of university teaching and supervision of students. During her free time, she enjoys reading and listening to music. And guess what? I'm a piano. But her age allows her for that. Ladies and gentlemen, join hands with me as I present to you Professor Ireen Choga. Before she takes on, we forget to acknowledge our students. The students are also here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Mesleng, for such a wonderful presentation of my biography. It's as if I'm dreaming. It's like it's not real. Okay, Vice Chancellor, Professor Bismarck Tobeka in absentia, all the Deputy Vice Chancellors in absentia, members of the Council who are present here this evening, the Executive Dean of the Faculty, Professor Babs in absentia, the Deputy Dean Teaching and Learning, Professor Herman van der Merwe, who is the Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor for this event, Deputy Dean Community Engagement, Professor Ntebogang Moroke, Deputy Dean Research, Prof Verona in absentia, Director of the school, Prof Vinant, and Deputy Directors, Prof Metzeleng, Professor Dunga, and Prof Andre Heimans in absentia. Let me also acknowledge my mom, who has traveled 1,200 kilometers from our village to come for this lecture, and my late father. Let me also acknowledge colleagues from the school, from the faculty, and the university at large, and also colleagues from other universities. Let me also acknowledge my friends and family who have traveled all the way to come for this lecture. Let me acknowledge my spiritual father, Father Patrick, and church members who are present here tonight, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Greetings, Dumelani, Molweni, Salibonan, Handet, and welcome to this inaugural lecture. I'm humbled to stand before you today to deliver the professorial inaugural lecture titled Explaining Exports and Export Diversification. I'll be looking at key drivers, trends in the sub-Saharan Africa. My profound gratitude goes to the Almighty God for enabling me to reach yet another milestone on my academic career. So pardon me, I'm coughing, so I'll be coughing here and there. But it doesn't matter, you'll be able to understand what I'll be saying. So this lecture is dedicated to my dad who passed on 11 months ago. He was supposed to come for the lecture last year in October, but he couldn't because he passed on in September. So when I was growing up, I used to admire my father. He was my source of inspiration. I used to admire his academic regalia. I used to associate, a graduation gown with riches. It's only when I graduated, that's when I realized that those two are not related. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad was intelligent, hardworking. He was a teacher. So when I was growing up, I used to tell everyone that when I grow up, I want to be a teacher like him. My dad edited my PhD thesis. You can ask Prof. Vice here. They were working on the thesis. So I wish my dad was here to attend this inaugural lecture. The intention is not to make you sad or to feel pity for you, but I just have to dedicate this lecture to my late father. May his soul rest in peace. So the layout of my presentation is as follows. I'm going to talk to you about what motivated me to work on this topic. That is when and where the journey started. I'm going to talk about the introduction. I'm going to talk about the measures of export diversification. I'm going to talk about background of export diversification in the sub-Saharan region. I'm going to talk about an overview of exports and export diversification in the sub-Saharan Africa. And I'll be showing you trends of exports and export diversification. I'm going to talk about the determinants of exports and export diversification. I'm going to talk about export instability and export diversification. I'm going to talk about export instability and structural changes in export diversification. I'm going to talk about export diversification and economic growth. Then I'll do the conclusion, contribution, and policy recommendations. So let me start by talking about what motivated me to work on this particular area. So, Mr. Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor, the journey of exports and export diversification started when I was in primary school, when my teacher told me that Africa is the richest continent on earth in terms of natural resources, that is the natural gas, minerals, forests, and wildlife. When I went to secondary school, my teachers told me that Africa is one of the poorest continents on earth, yet it is rich in terms of natural resources. I was surprised. I said, but the teacher said Africa is the richest continent. They said no. So when I came to university, I became fascinated with why sub-Saharan Africa is standard economic growth, despite having many natural resources. It was baffling to me that how can the richest continent in terms of natural resources be the poorest on earth? That is the resource case paradox, or we call it paradox of the plenty. So what is this paradox of the plenty? Or what is this resource case paradox? So ladies and gentlemen, resource case refers to the failure of many rich resource countries to benefit fully from their natural resources or natural resource wealth. In other words, we can say that a country that has an export-driven natural resource sector that generates large revenues but leads to economic stagnation and political instability. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm not trying to undermine people from the Democratic Republic of Congo, but it's a good example that we can use. So because of this resource case paradox, I became interested in international trade. International trade is one of the oldest subjects in economics. When I was given the international trade module to teach last semester, and I said to my students, international trade is one of the oldest subjects in economics, they said, ma'am, but others are teaching us about fourth industrial revolution, and we are talking about the oldest subject of economics. This module must be boring. So I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, you are not going to be bored. So what is international trade? International trade deals with economic and financial interdependence among nations. In other words, we are talking about the interaction of nations in terms of trade of goods and services, flow of money, and investment. So international trade came to existence as nations have existed, or when national borders were established. So since the birth of nations, people have been concerned about the goods and services crossing their borders. So even today, international trade is still regarded as an important element in increasing economic growth in all countries. So with globalization and digitalization, the world's economies are interdependent. People can connect instantly. You can send a WhatsApp message to your friend in the US, and workers have migrated around the world. I was not born here in South Africa, but I'm working here. So we can say that international trade and globalization are regarded as engines for economic growth. So the theme of this lecture stems from several debates on exports and export diversification, and in particular, the key drivers, or we can say determinants, the trends and its main impact on economic growth in the sub-Saharan Africa. So export diversification has been an important policy agenda in many developing countries. It has been a center of debate on how developing countries can improve economic performance, because it is believed that export diversification is a recipe for export-led growth. However, sub-Saharan Africa still depends on primary commodities, or we can say commodity exports. So what do we mean when we are saying commodity exports? Or what is a commodity? A commodity is a raw material product, for example, gold or oil or maize. So what is commodity dependence? We are saying that sub-Saharan Africa still depends on primary commodities. What is commodity dependence? So commodity dependence occurs when over 60% of a country's exports are commodities or primary products. Or commodity dependence occurs when a country relies on trade with a rich nation with a high demand for raw materials. So sub-Saharan Africa is rich in minerals, but poorly endowed in human capital and infrastructure. So low value-added exports explain sub-Saharan Africa's economic backwardness, and this goes hand in hand with the dependence theory. So what is the dependence theory? Dependence theory, it explains the underdevelopment and poverty. We say that underdevelopment and poverty is a necessary, in developing countries, is a necessary step for growth for developed nations. That's what a dependence theory means. So I can quote Warren Buffett and say, diversification is protection against ignorance, but if you do not feel ignorant, the need for it goes down drastically. So maybe after this lecture, maybe we are going to feel ignorant, or we are going to we are going to see that we are ignorant, or we are going to feel ignorant after this lecture. So according to Choga, and Tsegai 2015. Understanding the determinants of exports and export diversification is very important because exports have significant effect on economic growth, employment, and trade. And also, export diversification mitigates the external shocks associated with global demand. So what do we mean when we are saying external shocks? We are referring to things like the pandemics. COVID-19 pandemic is a good example. We are referring to natural disasters. For example, the earthquake that occurred in Turkey, wars, financial crisis. If you can still remember the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. And also natural resources can run out in future. And there might be oversupply of natural resources. Tastes may change. So export diversification is done to stabilize earnings or export earnings. And diversification is done to expand export revenues. So I've been talking about exports and export diversification. What is it? So exports, ladies and gentlemen, are defined as products or services that are produced or manufactured in one country and sold in another. For example, if we mine gold here in South Africa and sell it to the US, that's exports. I'm also going to talk about export basket. What is it? Export basket, ladies and gentlemen, is the composition of current exports or export mix in a country or in a region. For example, the basket can consist of minerals, metals, fuels, agricultural products. And I've been talking about export diversification. What is it? Export diversification, ladies and gentlemen, is defined as a change in the composition of the current export structure of an economy. And it can be described as reducing dependence on one product as a source of foreign exchange earnings. So what matters, ladies and gentlemen, is what a country exports. That is the type of products, not how much it exports, not the quantity, but the type of products that a country exports. So according to Choga and Tsegai 2015, there are two ways of achieving export diversification, either horizontally or vertically. And horizontally, it involves adding new products that are related to the existing ones. Or we can say that changing the export mix. We're talking about exports, the definition, export diversification, and we said that there are two ways of achieving export diversification, either horizontally or vertically. So now I want to show you the cartoon for export diversification. We can see that there are three gentlemen that are putting different products in the export basket. Remember, we have defined what an export basket is all about. So we can say that recent developments in trade theory underlines that the benefits of trade are derived more from the expansion into new products, which is a complete opposite of specialization and comparative advantage, which is the cornerstone of trade theory. Now, how do we measure export diversification? I've defined it. I'm sure by now you understand what it means. Now we should look at how export diversification is measured. So export diversification can take place in two ways. That is exports to new products or exports to new markets. And there are several ways of measuring the degree of export diversification. And we use the concentration ratios to measure export diversification. And the export diversification index is computed by measuring the absolute deviation of the country's share of total exports from the world structure. So there's an equation that I've put on the board, but don't worry about the equation. I know when we start putting equations, some people will start saying, but what is she talking about? But what is important is for you to know that we use concentration ratios to measure export diversification, and there is something called the export diversification index. So this index, it ranges between 0 and 1, and 1 represents total concentration, and 0 represents total diversification. So the most used measures of export diversification are the Hedgeman-Heffender index, the absolute deviation, and the Thiel index. And authors have used one or several of these measures across board, and results are not dependent on the measure. So it doesn't matter whether you use absolute deviation or the Heffendau index or Thiel index. The results are the same. Now, let's look at the background of export diversification in the sub-Saharan region. So during the 1960s and the 1970s, the income per capita for most sub-Saharan economies were comparable to those of East Asia and South Asia because sub-Saharan African countries are endowed with natural resources. But in the late 1970s, development in the sub-Saharan Africa was not sustainable due to structural institutions such as politics, policy constraints, and poverty. And also, sub-Saharan Africa experienced trade volatility as a result of too much dependence on exports of a few commodities. And export diversification performance of East Asian countries since the 1970s accounted approximately 800% growth of exports against only 70% for Africa. So you can see the difference that in East Asia, export diversification grew by 800%, but in Africa only 70%. So we can say that sub-Saharan Africa exemplifies the resource case paradox. Remember, I've defined the resource case paradox, and we say that resource case paradox occurs when countries fail to benefit from natural resources, when countries fail to benefit from their natural resources. So the sub-Saharan region lags behind the rest of the world, despite its wealth in oil, gas, minerals, and even arable land. So exports in sub-Saharan African countries are heavily dependent on primary commodities in contrast to other regions such as East Asia, North America, Europe, whose exports are dominated by manufactured products. So according to World Integrated Trade Solutions 2019, sub-Saharan Africa is mainly focused on the production of primary commodities, and the top major 4 exports are in the sub-Saharan Africa are petroleum, gold, diamond, and cocoa beans, whereas the top 5 major exports to the world in East Asia are monolithic integrated circuits, digital transmission apparatus, petroleum oils, parts and accessories of automatic data process, parts of electrical apparatus for line telephone. You can see the difference, that here in sub-Saharan Africa, we concentrate on primary products. So comparing East Asian and sub-Saharan economies, we can see that the sub-Saharan region is heavily reliant on fuels and minerals and metals. So the high concentration of sub-Saharan African exports in traditional products is seen as a major setback for development in the region. Now let's take a look at this.
Now, African economies
video.
must rethink export diversification if the economies are to survive economic shocks caused by not just the coronavirus pandemic, but also Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The UN Conference on Trade and Development says in its 2022 report on Africa development that countries need to boost the export of high-value services. They also need to expand private business access to financial services and tap into new financial technologies as well. Now, the report notes that the continent still relies on the export of a range of primary products in agriculture and mining, despite decades-long calls to diversify and move up the value chain. The report recommends that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is key for future diversification. All right, then let's explore this report in a bit more detail with Habiba Ben Barker. She's an economist and the head of the Africa section at the UN Conference on Trade and Development. Thank you very much for your time this evening. So African economies, diversifying the economies, I've heard this as a teenager. Now I'm a fossil at 35 years old and I'm still hearing the exact same story. What's gone wrong?
Well, good evening. I think what went wrong is that there has been a missing link, basically, in the strategies and policies that African countries' government have put in place to diversify. Most of the diversification strategies have focused mostly on either diversifying away from one sector into another one, or maybe diversifying within the same sector, trying to add new products and services without ensuring that the conducive skills, technology, financing, and other structural factors are in place to kind of foster diversification into more value-added products and services. And in our report, we found that that missing link has been basically trading services. And trading services plays a significant role in terms of adding value to a specific product, a specific sector, whether it's in the agricultural sector, it's in the mining sector, it's in manufacturing and all. So services can play a significant role in creating more forward-backward linkages and ensuring that some of the products that are produced then will add value, will be more competitive on the global market. And when we talk about services, we are not talking about the traditional services that we see mostly in African countries, which are travel and transport, but we are talking about high knowledge intensive services such as business services, technology driven services, information and communication technologies, and financial services.
Oh, okay. So from the video, Africa must diversify its exports to cushion itself against the crisis. Now, let's move on, and I should address the trends of exports and export diversification in the sub-Saharan region. So according to World Bank, 2021, sub-Saharan region has the highest export diversification index as compared to the other regions. If I say diversification index, I'm sure by now you understand what it means. So we can see from the diagram, if we check that green line for sub-Saharan Africa, we can see that it's on top of other line for other regions. So the export diversification index averaged 0.62 from 1995 to 2021. So we can say that the export diversification index is closer to 1, which means that the export basket is concentrated on primary commodities. Now, if we move on and look at exports of goods from sub-Saharan Africa to the top trading partner, the top trading partner between 2015 and 2019 was China. So the exports to China are dominated by raw materials and intermediate goods, as we can see on the diagram. And a few exports for capital goods and consumer goods, as we can see from the diagram. So this shows that sub-Saharan exports to the main trading partner are mainly commodity exports. And we know that commodity exports, they often suffer from export instability. Now let's look at the imports from China to sub-Saharan Africa between the period of 2015 to 2009. So imports from China consist of capital goods followed by consumer goods and intermediate goods, if we can check on the diagram. And imports of raw materials are very few from China. This also shows that sub-Saharan African countries specialize in the primary commodities or raw materials. Now, let's look at the exports of product groups between 2015 and 2019 for different regions. We have exports from sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia and Pacific, Europe and Central Asia, Latin America and Caribbean, North America, South Asia, and Middle East and North Africa. We can see that exports from the sub-Saharan region is dominated by raw materials. Exports for capital goods are very, very few, if we can check at that particular table. If you can check at that particular table, we can see that exports from sub-Saharan Africa are dominated by raw materials and very few exports on capital goods. Now, if we look at the global rank of Africa in exports, we can see that Africa's total exports accounted for only 2.4% of the world exports in 2018, which was second from last. And the least was Oceania, that accounted only 1.6% of the global exports. And Asia, remember, we compare ourselves with Asia. We cannot compare ourselves with North America or Europe. Asia's total exports accounted for 42%, of the global exports in 2018, and other continents accounted for 58%. So Europe was even behind Asia in 2018 in terms of the global rank and exports. So now I've talked about the trends. You have seen how exports and export diversification, the trends in the sub-Saharan Africa between the period of 2015 and 2019. Now I should talk about the determinants of export and export diversification. So the determinants of exports and export diversification has been studied extensively over the past 5 decades. And my own PhD and master's work makes a contribution to literature on the determinants of exports. My master's one was focusing on the determinants and growth of South African exports. And my PhD also was focusing on export diversification. So studies were done on South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southern African Development Community, which is SADC, East Asia, African countries, emerging markets, and developing economies. And different results were obtained depending on the country of study and also on the methodology used. So this is just a summary showing the study, the country where the study was done, and the key determinants of exports and export diversification that were found. So it can be noted that the important determinants found to be robust in explaining exports and export diversification are trade openness, real effective exchange rate, human capital, per capita income, investment, foreign direct investment, infrastructure, and population. So trade openness was found to be the major determinant of exports and export diversification. And what is trade openness? So trade openness is defined as the extent to which a country involves in international trade activities, according to Choga 2014. So how do we measure export diversification? Trade openness. Trade openness is measured by the ratio between the sum of exports and imports and gross domestic product. And we say that the higher the index, the stronger the country. And also, it is assumed that the faster the rate of innovation in industrialized economies, the faster the growth through imitation in developing countries. Now, although we assume that trade openness directly affects the amount of trade activities that a country conducts with trading partners and the degree of export diversifications, there are limitations associated with this determinant. Trade openness must be accompanied by strong industrial base, good infrastructure, and good financial system. It's not just a matter of signing trade agreements, or it's not just a matter of saying South Africa is open for business or Zimbabwe is open for business. We must check our industrial base. We must check infrastructure. We must check also the financial system of a country. In addition, it is argued that large countries undertake a great share of trade within their borders. They tend to have lower trade to GDP ratios. Remember, we said the stronger, the higher the index, the stronger the country. So factors such as population and geography distort trade openness. And for example, a lower ratio does not necessarily mean higher trade barriers, but it might be due to factors such as size of the economy, geographic remoteness from potential trading partners. The second determinant is real effective exchange rate, which is defined as the weighted average of a country's currency in relation to the currency of its trading partners. So, according to Ben, the appreciation of the real exchange rate can have a negative impact on export diversification. And also, literature has shown that a higher and uncompetitive exchange rate induces less diversification. And in contrast, a low exchange rate can encourage diversification of exports and trading partners. So real exchange rate volatility promotes export concentration. Now, the other determinant is human capital. And what is human capital? Human capital comprises of employee knowledge, skills, know-how, good health, education. It is assumed that human skills increase diversification, and accumulation of human capital gives room for countries to change their patterns of specialization. This is because production of manufactured goods or services require knowledge base. And human capital accumulation contributes positively to export diversification, and literature has found that human capital reduces concentration of exported products. The other determinant is foreign direct investment, which is defined as investment by a third party from one country into a business or corporate in another country with a goal to establish a long-term interest. So through technology transfer and improvement in countries' productivity, foreign direct investment increases export diversification. So export diversification acts as a conduit that infuses knowledge, new technologies, material, production, and management expertise into the countries the funds are directed to. But it has its own weaknesses as well. Foreign direct investment has been linked to negative implications, such as international organizations using their negotiating powers to influence government of the host country to allow them to access raw materials in return for foreign direct investment. And foreign direct investment leads to depletion of natural resources within local markets. We also have infrastructure as a determinant of export diversification. And infrastructure is defined as the basic physical systems of a business, region, or nation, and often involves production of public goods or production processes. And it is assumed that infrastructure development stimulates investment and export diversification. And infrastructure, it provides access also to new markets, thereby considered as a prerequisite for better diversification. And poor infrastructure has negative impact on manufacturing activity. We also have population and per capita income. And population is associated with increased labor that can be used in the diversified commodities. Here we are talking about productive population. We are not talking about, I don't want to say useless population, but those people who are always high with their nwu-pukke, I don't think they can be, productive. Also, population growth increases export diversification by increasing demand and providing markets for new products. The other determinant is per capita income, which is a measure of the amount of money earned per person in a nation or a region. And it is assumed that per capita income offers opportunity for increased diversification due to an increase in buying power and ability of consumers to afford a variety of commodities. Then we have public investment and manufacturing value added. These are also determinants of export diversification. And investment is defined as an important determinant because it can lead to increased productivity into new sectors. And it encourages research and development and innovation. And manufacturing value added of an economy is the total estimate of the net output of all residents' manufacturing activity units obtained by adding up outputs and subtracting intermediate consumption. So value added in manufacturing will increase the likelihood of a country to diversify. Now, we want to move on and look at export instability and structural changes in export diversification. So what is export instability? Export instability is uncertainty about the export earnings accruing to a country. In other words, export instability is also called the year-to-year fluctuations in export figures. And it can be defined as the difference between the actual and the estimated value of exports. And literature has shown that export instability is caused by, among others, concentration of exports on traditional commodities and the sale of primary commodities, as well as geographic concentration. Now, let's look at the export instability and structural changes in export diversification. Export instability is said to cause a problem because it affects the country's domestic income. It also affects consumption, it affects savings, it affects investment, tax revenues, balance of payments, and also the capacity to import, especially for developing countries. And Choga 2014 found that export instability index is high for semi-manufactured and primary commodities in South Africa between 1980 and 2012 compared to the manufactured goods. And also studies, for example, the ones that I've listed there, found a negative relationship between export instability and economic growth. There is limited literature on export diversification and structural changes in export diversification. There's a study that was done by United Nations in 2018 that focused on analyzing the structural transformation and export structure for 5 African countries. And results showed that Mauritius had a successful diversification from sugar to textiles. And also, Choga and Tsegai, 2015, were among the first to investigate the extent and nature of export diversification in South Africa. And results of the commodity-specific cumulative experience function plots showed that commodities such as scientific equipment, transport equipment, motor vehicles, furniture, machinery, electronic products indicated that the commodities are non-traditional in nature, whereas gold, agricultural products, and wood are traditional in nature. Now, let's look at the impact of export diversification on economic growth. So the significance of export diversification on economic growth has been highlighted in alternative viewpoints in economics. There's no direct theoretical framework explaining the determinants of export diversification. There are 2 conflicting opinions on export diversification and specialization from various theoretical perspectives. For example, the classical trade theorists propose the opinion that countries should specialize in the production and exports of commodities in which they have a comparative advantage. But Bishk and Singer hypothesis criticize the classical view, and they are of the view that specialization and exporting traditional products may increase the degree of vulnerability to external shocks, especially for developing countries. And empirical efforts aimed at estimating the long-run impacts of export diversification on economic growth has generated conflicting results. For example, Mudenda, Choga, and Chigamba, 2014 confirms a positive relationship between export diversification and economic growth for South Africa. We also have other researchers who found a positive relationship, like I've listed below. There's one study that found a negative relationship between export diversification and economic growth in Colombia. So the review of literature has provided enough reason to believe that export diversification has a positive impact on economic growth, especially in developing countries. So in conclusion, the debate on exports and export diversification has gained much attention in literature recently, given that global trade is expanding and the world is relying on emerging countries. It is believed that export diversification manages export instability as well as promotes economic growth. And studies have revealed that the major determinants for exports and export diversification are trade openness, real effective exchange rate, human capital accumulation, population growth, foreign direct investment, per capita income, infrastructure, public investment, price of inputs and manufacturing value added. Several researchers reviewed that export diversification has a positive effect on economic growth, especially in developing countries. And in addition, most studies have shown the negative effect of export instability on economic growth. And also studies revealed that export diversification minimizes the impact of export instability on economic growth. So, ladies and gentlemen, do you feel ignorant? Okay, so that marks the end of my lecture. I'm going to talk about capacity building. So, I've contributed to academia in the following. I've supervised 19 master students successfully. And out of the 19, 5 of them are lecturers, and 2 of them are sitting here today as my colleagues. I've supervised 10 PhD students successfully, and 5 of them are senior lecturers at different universities, and 2 of them are here for this inaugural lecture. I have mentored 2 postdoctoral fellows. I have published 49 papers in accredited journals. I've presented 15 papers at international conferences. So you can see some of the pictures with my students. If you can read the WhatsApp message that was sent by one of my PhD students. Hi, Prof, how are you today? How are you? Today marks 1 year after my graduation. I'm forever grateful for you not giving up on me. Last month, I was offered a position as energy specialist at USAID, my dream job since I started my PhD journey. Thank you once again. This is coming from my student. Now, I have to acknowledge people who helped me. I want to acknowledge my mentors. One of my mentors is here. Prof. Eta, may you raise up your hand? So he helped me a lot when I was doing my PhD. And also after my PhD, I supervised my first PhD student with Prof. Eta. I was the co-supervisor. I also want to acknowledge Prof. Ronin Mwadi, is at Nelson Mandela University, Prof. Ziramba, University of Namibia, Prof. Olufemi Saibu, University of Lagos, Prof. Mnapo, from our school, and the late Prof. Mavetera. They were my mentors. I also want to acknowledge my supervisor, Professor Asrat Segai, for being patient with me when I was studying, especially my PhD. I was a full-time lecturer, so it was not easy for me to balance work and study at the same time, but my supervisor was patient with me. I also want to acknowledge my classmate, Prof. Andrew Mareza, is now at University of Mpumalanga, for encouraging me to register for PhD. I registered not because I wanted PhD, but I registered because Andrew registered. I want to acknowledge my colleagues from my department. If they're here, they can raise up their hands. Yeah, I work with amazing people. We are not competing with these people. We work together. I also want to acknowledge colleagues from my school. I know you are many. Thank you for supporting me. I want to acknowledge the faculty management, Professor Metzleng, Prof. Herman, Prof. Ndebo, Prof. Venant, Prof. Dunga, Prof. Ma for leading the department, Prof. Potogita, and all faculty management for the support that you gave me, especially during the interviews for the full professor. It was not easy, but I managed to sail through. I also want to acknowledge the Secretariat, Cindy, ST, Esme, Nompulelo, Makadi, and Jana for organizing this event. They were going up and down with the deco. I'm told that there's refreshments after this lecture. I want to acknowledge my students. I've seen some of them are here. I'm standing here today because of my students. Had it been there are no students, I was not going to be here. I want to acknowledge my friends, Dr. Ellen Rungani. She's my friend. I still recall in 2006 when I was dumped by my boyfriend when I wanted to kill myself. She's the one who balanced me. Yeah, it's a true story. It's a true story. That person dumped me, took my money, paid the lobola to someone else. So I almost died, but thanks to Ellen. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Arthur Mapanga. Some people think that Arthur Mapanga is not. He's my relative, he's my in-law. For those who think that he's my he's my in-law. He helped me when I was preparing for my full professorship interview. He used to do a dry run with me. I also want to acknowledge my partner for his unwavering support. He's my pillar of strength. When you see me happy, you must know that he was around over the weekend. I want to acknowledge my family, my children, for always being there for me. I have so many children. Don't ask me how I take care of them. There are many. I want to acknowledge my mom and my late father for giving birth to me. Otherwise, this lecture was not going to be there. And also taking good care of me when I was growing up. I was in boarding school for 6 years. There were 6 of us. I don't know how they were doing, but they paid school fees for me. So this is a picture of my mom and my dad. Although my dad passed on, I was graduating with my PhD at University of Fort Hare. So thank you in closing. Thank you, Kialeboha and Attenda, Danke. I want to end by putting you in a parting mood. I was told that there are a lot of drinks and food, so I must prepare you for the drinks. So after this lecture, to be continued. Oh, I used to think that I'm the crazy one. But you can see that you can pass it on. So when you see Prof being crazy, just know that it's coming from me. A very good evening to you all, to all our distinguished invitees present here who honored the invitation to come and celebrate this special day. I would like to acknowledge the great honor and privilege to propose this vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. I would like to thank the Almighty God for making today's occasion a resounding success. A special thanks to the priest for the devotion and words of wisdom. I would like also to acknowledge the university management, the faculty leadership, faculty colleagues from various universities who have also honored this event. Special heartfelt thanks to the non-teaching staff for organizing this event behind the scenes. We also want to thank friends and family who are here to honor my friend Professor Choga on this event. Thank you very much for celebrating this big day for her. It's a great honor. And thank you, University of Northwest, for making a dream come true. Thank you, Ndatenda.
Wow, what a wonderful event. Eish, that is really, really inspiring. And as you can see, a true teacher, resilient. When the power went down, she just continued because the show must go on. So yeah, now I also understand diversification. I must say, I was a bit worried at one stage, when we saw that equation, and I thought, oh, I know some of the teachers, they say, before you can leave, you must first solve the equation. I was worried. So I was looking at Prof Ntebo next to me because I know she might be able to help me with that one. But colleagues, my name is Herman van der Merwe. I'm the Deputy Dean responsible for teaching and learning in the faculty. And it's my privilege this evening to act on behalf of the DVC because of the fact that they're unfortunately busy with a strategic planning session and they couldn't be here. But I know that in spirit, they are here. Now, I sort of really thought about these different things, and I mean, if I now look, because the same thing that sort of intrigued Prof Choga with regard to the fact that we've got all these riches, but we're not seen as a very rich country, and it all. And I mean, I've been talking to the colleagues a lot, especially about downstream and upstream activities, and I think that is sometimes where we lose the plot, and we see tonight that. With diversification, and that we're really concentrating on that primary product. I've also learned those of you are old enough to remember a CD, ne? Sometimes people don't know what a CD is, but nonetheless, because I've one of the grandchildren, I still have vinyls, and they said, what black CDs are that? So. But nonetheless, what I heard was the fact that, we listen to this fantastic music, but the data file gets sent to China. And they do the CD and then we import it. Those kind of things doesn't really make sense to me. But yeah, those are the things that really happen. But what I want to share with you is that, a locked door is only an obstacle if you do not have the key. So in life, we are confronted with many, many locked doors. Some are made of solid materials like wood or metal or whatever. But there's a lot of treasures hidden in the labyrinth of our minds. And these are very real, is as real as you can get, because it becomes a formidable obstacle for you to overcome. And then the key to that lies within people. So at the Northwest University, our lecturers and our researchers, and particularly those who hold the title of professor, are the guardians of our keys to our future, as an institution and as a country. It's their responsibility to unlock our youth's potential and to expose those hidden treasures to benefit us all. Now, you've seen a true leader tonight. So true leadership cannot consist of mere competence in an academic field. It also demands character from a person in the position of a professor. And I can confirm that Prof. Ireen Choga is such a person. The Northwest University, in recognition of excellence, exceptional leadership, and distinction in the field of higher education, confers an exponent of these qualities of the highest academic title of professor. So it's really a pinnacle of an achievement to become a full professor. To the recipients of this title, it really marks, as I said, the pinnacle of intellectual pursuit. The price of this is unfortunately high. You have to live through it to earn it. I know someone who said that, to gain 10 years experience, you unfortunately need 10 years. So you can't, there's no quick way to do that. And I think to be patient and to do this is a very, very special process. It's a growing process. Sometimes people think, they can come in, they can they get a PhD, the next moment they're a professor, the next moment they're a full professor, and then what? But it's a growing process, and that takes time. Prof. Choga, we trust that today will mark the start of an exciting new phase in your professional life. I know it started long ago. And this lecture is long overdue, and we do recognize your late father. And we know that last year this should have happened. But nonetheless, you've shown that you will continue to apply your talents in the area of research and education. And I know you will never allow yourself to stagnate. I think you've proven that to us. We know that your quest for true academic excellence is unending. And that as a true leader, you will unite others in this quest. And as members of the Northwest University family, we share your dreams. And we await your future achievements in eager anticipation. Top achievers seem to have certain common traits. I Googled a few common traits for top achievers this afternoon. And that sets them apart to become better and to rise the bar of success even higher. I'm going to share 5 of those with you. And I think you've demonstrated some of them already to us tonight. I wanted to say to you that great professors have guts. Because when the going gets tough, they do more research or explain one more time to help their students to obtain the insight. They keep on going, and when they experience setbacks and disappointments, they will always find a way to bounce back. And we saw that tonight as well. So great professors also have strong values founded on a sound ethical base. They recognize the common humanity of all people, respect the dignity of others, and act with honesty and integrity. Great professors also serve as role models for others and take this responsibility very seriously. We also saw that in your presentation tonight. They always remember that they are setting the example and redefine the role for the next generation. Great professors also help others to grow and to develop academically. And that also we saw today. They invest in their vision, their talent, and the countless hours of hard work in the success of others. And then lastly, great professors make a real difference in the lives of those they are privileged to touch. Touching and changing lives is what you do. So thank you very much for that. So, Prof. Choga, we know that you, with your talents, skills, and wisdom, will make a difference at the Northwest University and will significantly contribute to our efforts to establish this dynamic faculty and institution as the leading brand in higher education, nationally and internationally. I now have the privilege to call you to the front to hand over your professional citation and a gift from the Northwest University. And I can now announce that the Northwest University now formally recognizes you as one of our academic leaders, and I can now declare you as a full professor of the Northwest University. Thank you very much, and congratulations again, and God bless on your journey. We will now stand for the singing of the national anthem, and after that, I'm going to ask Prof. Choga to lead us out of the venue, if that's okay. Thank you very much, and then afterwards, I think there will be some refreshments served. Thank you.